Welcome to the photographytoday.net podcast. Two companies have announced film single-lens reflex cameras recently, and while on the surface that might not seem unusual, it is. It's been probably 10 years since the announcement of the last film single-lens reflex camera, although not the last film camera, because several companies, notably Leica and Cosina, have done some work with rangefinder film cameras, or film rangefinder cameras, if you will. I believe the last film SLR was the Nikon F6. What's notable is both of these projects are being funded through Kickstarter. Now a little bit about each of the projects. The Reflex is a modular SLR with interchangeable backs and an interchangeable lens mount. So the body holds just the shutter assembly, some electronics, actually quite a few electronics, and two types of flash units. Neither of them is a pop-up flash. Both of the flashes are on either side of the lens mount, which is rather interesting in itself. The other camera is the Ihagee Elbaflex. Now the Elbaflex takes the very old school approach. It's a fully manual SLR without a meter. Once again, it also is backed by a Kickstarter project. Comparing the teams behind both of the projects, I think you see two different approaches. The Reflex is a very modern camera, although not electronically modern in terms of having autofocus and matrix metering and things like that. However, it does have the ability to transmit exposure information via Bluetooth to your smartphone. The Reflex isn't the first camera to have interchangeable backs. I think there have been three. One was the Zeiss Icon Contaflex, the Zeiss Icon Contarex and associated cameras, and also the Rolleiflex SL 2000 and 3000 series. I'm trying to think. Oh, yes, there is one. There was the ADOX 300, and that was a scale focus camera that also had interchangeable backs, although not interchangeable lenses. The Reflex is backed by a team of slightly younger folks, and I think that their thought is to bring film photography into the modern age as far as being able to link your film camera with your smartphone. Sort of an interesting idea. The Elbaflex is backed by a team made up of former Leica and Schneider folks. So it really definitely does take the old school European approach, particularly in the fact that it is a all manual SLR with no ability to meter at all. You'll need a handheld meter, or like many people do, it's particularly when shooting black and white, you sort of go by your standard rules, your standard exposure rules. The Elbaflex is going to be made in the Arsenal factory, which was located in the Ukraine. That factory produced Kiev cameras for the former Soviet Union, and they were notable for being fairly sturdy, not particularly refined instruments. The German team that's going to be overseeing production of the Elbaflex has promised that they are making a number of refinements, particularly with the shutter, and also I believe some sealing, so that there will be no light leakage. The Elbaflex is going to have a Nikon F mount. Compared with that, the Reflex will have interchangeable lens mounts. The standard lens mount will be the M42 screw mount, which was first introduced with the Contax S SLR from, at that time, it was East German Zeiss Icon, later became Pentacon, after a lengthy court battle involving the two branches of Carl Zeiss. The Reflex also will offer several other lens mounts. I believe it's the Olympus OM, the Nikon F, and the Canon FD. I think it should leave the door open for the ability to add a future mount, and of course it would depend on sales and demand whether we see the Reflex adapted to other now defunct lens mounts, such as the Yashica Contax and let's see what else. Oh, Minolta, of course, Konica, and possibly even some more obscure mounts such as the Rolleiflex QBM and others. Both of these, as I mentioned, are being funded through Kickstarter, and I think the launch date is going to be sometime next year. If you're going to ask me what I think about these two projects, I think they're great. I think the Reflex is going to be an interesting project in that it brings in a lot of younger photographers who have no experience in film, but have had a lot of experience with things like smartphone photography, for example, and even some point and shoots, and certainly digital photography. You know, it's going to allow those who probably have an interest in film photography. I think we'll see the same type of revival that we're seeing in quote unquote vinyl, meaning record albums, after the advent of the CD-ROM really killed off that industry. Now there are a lot of people interested in turntables, and even cassette tapes, from what I understand, are starting to make a small yet a small comeback. I don't think we're going to see the 8-tracks anytime soon. Now, when it comes to the Elbaflex, one of the criticisms that I heard, that I've read, is that this is nothing more than a warmed-over Kiev 19. And in fact, the Ihagee team has said that, yes, this is based on the Kiev 19, but they've made a number of improvements to the body. It always comes down to the buyer, specifically you. And I think the Cosina Voigtlander and the Zeiss Icon are perfect examples of this. And even going back, if you look at the collaboration between Minolta and Leica in the 1970s, each side had input, and they produced, I believe, associated cameras. You had the Minolta CLE and you had the Leica CL, and on the SLR side you had the Leica R4, I believe, and the Minolta XD11, from what I understand. You had the Leica M5, which many Leica purists, of course, do not really care for, mainly because of its shape and the fact that it probably wasn't purely a Leica camera. So, it always comes down to the buyer. Is the buyer willing to accept a Kiev 19 that has been rehabilitated, I guess, is one good way to put it? Or do they really believe it's just a Kiev 19 with a nice covering and a higher price tag? That, of course, once again, is up to the buyer. But my final opinion is that it's nice to see some interest in film photography, and the fact that the larger camera makers, I think at this point we can say that they've totally abandoned film photography. It is nice to see some interest in the medium, and we'll see what the future holds. You can read more about this on photographytoday.net, and if you'd like to join some conversations and some discussions about photography, you can join the photographytoday.net forums at photographytoday.net/forums. Thanks for listening.